Hello, my name is Oktay Avcı, and today we are going to talk about how to improve your presentative skills. So, what are we going to talk about today in specific is we're going to talk about practice, we're going to talk about confidence, and we're going to talk about some important features that you should have as a presentator. And after that, we're going to talk about developing your own style. So, let us continue with the first one, which is practice. So, practice. Practice is the keyword of, all of the presentative skills that you should have, because no matter how good you are, no matter how bad you are, if you don't have any practice, you will just be doomed to fail. Because even though if you're a fantastic speaker, fantastic public speaker, if you can, very easily make interactions with your audience, you can make eye contact without any anxiety. Uh, I mean, if you're that good, but you don't know what you're talking about, all of those, good qualities of yours are just going to be, how should I say, they're just going to be worth nothing. You know, what you should do, even if you're so good and even if you're so bad, you should always practice. What you should do is you should always, at least once you should go over the presentation over your head. You should always, know what you're talking about. You should always know the, how should I say, the basic structure of what you're going to talk about. You should always know how you should go from A to B. Without knowing anything, or without knowing the basic knowledge of what you're talking about, you can't even improvise on that, you know, because even though if you don't know something about the topic that you are presenting, I mean, the presentation that you will give without any practice would just be boring, monotone, would be probably no fun. So what you should always do is that you should always practice. You shouldn't, always practice in front of people. I mean, you can practice by yourself. But, practicing in front of people also helps you too. So it's more desirable, should I say, than practicing by yourself. But, you should always and always practice at least once in order to have a good presentation. So let us continue with another keyword that we have in presentations, which is confidence. Well, confidence is a thing that you should always have. It shouldn't, you know, in presentation you need it, yes, but you can always apply to it something other than presentations itself. So what's confidence plays here? What confidence plays here is that you should always be confident in your abilities as a presentator. Even if you're bad, even if you're good, you should always have confidence in yourself. Because if you're not confident and you're a shy person, whenever you're trying to, make your presentation, if you're shy, if you're full of fear, and you're not confident, people would just, they wouldn't care about your presentation, because what they would, pay attention to is that they're going to pay attention to you. And why is that? Because they're seeing someone shaking, their hands are shaking, they're mumbling their words, and they're not talking very loudly, they cannot hear them. So the audience I mean, won't even be looking at the presentation, but they will be looking at you if you're not confident. So, but a good question that you can ask me is that how are we going to, keep our fears, our anxieties, and our confidence, like how can we, develop our confidence? Well, that's the answer to that I can give is that is the first keyword that we have seen, which is practice. Practicing in front of people is more preferable. So you should always practice. even myself, like, the first time that I've ever given a presentation in the English language, which I'm not a native speaker of. I mean, the first time I've given that presentation, I mean, before that presentation, I was full of fear. Why? Because it was the first time I was giving a presentation in the English language. I was so afraid that I was going to, uh, blow this presentation because of this language barrier that I had. And I was also anxious because, that first presentation was a gateway for me for some such creative things. But what has happened is that the first 1 minute of the presentation was very anxious, very fearful, very weird because I wasn't moving that much. I wasn't talking that much. I was looking at the presentation itself. So I was looking at the slides only. But after a while, I've turned behind, and I've seen the audience smile. So naturally, I just became, more relaxed, more smiling, and more, confident in my abilities. So what you should do is that you should always be confident in your abilities, and you should always try to keep your fears, your anxieties under control, even though, it can be so hard for you to do that. But you should always try to, keep those emotions under control in order to become more confident. And in order to become more confident, you have to practice. So if you're, as I said before, if you're not confident, you wouldn't gain their attention, you wouldn't gain their attention from the audience. Look at the picture here, if you're not confident, if you're shy, people just wouldn't listen to you, People just, stand like this. They will look at you and they will nod their heads to you, probably, but they wouldn't have any idea of what you're saying. So what you should do is that you should be confident in your abilities and you should assert your dominance, should I say? You should be dominant because you're the one who's giving the presentation. Well, that's why you have to be always confident and you always have to do some practices. So let us talk about some of the important features uh, as a presentator like yourself should have, you know. Well, the first feature that we should talk about is that, it's the voice, your voice. You need to make yourself to be heard. Everyone, every single people in the audience should hear you. If you're giving a presentation in a large place, and if you don't have any microphones, you should always, make yourself hearable. The front row of people can hear you, but the back row of the audience cannot hear you. That's not a good sign. But in order to make yourself heard, you shouldn't just, completely, how should I say, be loud. You shouldn't yell. You should always find an appropriate amount of volume of yourself, and you should, change your volume depending on the presentation and depending on the audience itself. If you want to be, uh, sorry, if you want to, let them hear you, you can raise your voice in order to get their attention, right? You can raise your voice in order to get their attention, and you can lower your voice in some parts. It all depends on your presentation. What you shouldn't do, in my opinion, is that you shouldn't, keep a low and monotone voice. But I cannot say that will work for you for sure. Some people with monotone voices are very good. Like they have very good presentation skills, and they're very good presentators. But this is what you should do. You should try and find the most appropriate volume. So your volume is very important for the audience in order to get their attention. So you should always make yourself be heard as a good presentator. And Another very, very important thing that you should know beforehand is your audience. Because if you know your audience, you can adjust yourself to the audience itself. For example, if your audience is a bunch of 80-year-old, very old people, maybe you shouldn't be that, low voiced. You should, speak louder. Maybe because they're old and they're adults, maybe you can lower the amount of pictures that you use. You can use different terminology dependent on your audience. You can basically change the way you speak depending on your audience. But for example, if your audience is just a bunch of kids, you can use more pictures. You can use some simpler terminology. You can use some, you can be more funny because kids like funny things. So you can adjust yourself depending on the audience. So you should always know your audience beforehand, before your presentation. So continue with the next feature is the pace, should I say. You should, for, I mean, sorry, you should always know if you're limited by some certain amount of time or not. Because if you are limited by some time and that time is running down fast and you still have so many slides to go through, you might, increase your pace, you might increase your speaking, uh, increase the speed of your speaking, but if you're speaking too fast, your audience might have a hard time understanding you. And if you're speaking too fast because of your time limit, you are going to get panicked, you're going to lose your confidence, and your presentation is just, going to go downhill from that point. So you should always know the limits that you're given by some by the organizator. Sorry. So you should always know your limits, and you should always pace yourself, pace your speaking, pace your presentation, pace the speed of your presentation, depending on the time limit that you've been given. So knowing the time is an important feature that you, knowing the time and regulating your pace is an important feature that you should have. Another good feature that you can use is that you can always have some eye contact. Eye contact is paramount, I guess, because whenever you're looking at someone directly in their eyes, you are directly getting their attention. So there's simply no way of them for to break their attention to you and to the presentation as well. So you need to make some eye contacts. You don't need to make eye contacts with each and every single person in the audience, but you can you can pick 2 to 3 people in like each line of group of people. So pick some certain people, or just have an eye contact with random people. But eye contact is very important in order to get some attention. So it's paramount here. And another very, very, and I need to stress this, very important feature is that interaction. You need to interact with your audience. You need to ask them questions. You need to make some jokes in order to break the ice. You need to, how should I say, use your body, use your hands. You need to move around. You need to move around in order to get their attention. For example, if you think a group of, uh, how should I say, a group of people in the audience is not paying attention, you can walk beside them whilst you are still explaining the presentation. And if they have any common sense, they will stop their maybe they're talking. That's why, because they're not paying attention to you. So they will stop their talking. They will stop whatever they are doing, and they will pay attention to you. And you should always side. you should always side yourself to the how should I say, the audience itself. You shouldn't look at the presentation. You shouldn't look at the slides. I mean, you can take quick peeks at them, but you shouldn't always look at them. You should look at the audience and you should interact with them. Ask questions about the uh, presentation itself, ask questions about the main topic itself, make some uh, jokes about the images that you've used, the in order to break that ice. So interaction with your audience is just paramount. It's just so important. If you're not interacting with your audience, it can just be just boring. But some people do not require any moving in the how should I say, moving in between the audience. But it also depends on the form of presentation you are giving. Well, you can't obviously walk around people, walk amongst people if you're giving a digital presentation, So, but you should always keep that in mind that you should interact with people. So let's talk about your style. What kind of a style you should develop? Well, I cannot exactly say what kind of style that you should develop. So what you should do is that you should, pick those things that I've talked about. You know, should you be more loud? Should you be more shy? Should you walk around, or should you just stay where you are? You need to try all of these by yourself, by doing practices, by getting feedbacks, and by doing actual presentations to some sort of people. So what you should do in order to develop your own style is that you need to constantly try to find your unique way of presentation. Well, for example, me, what I'm doing is that I'm basically just getting the basic knowledge of what I'm going to talk about. I know that how can I go between point A and point B. So I know the main topic, I know what I'm going to talk about, but in specific, I don't really, how should I say, I don't really look about. I don't really, the word I'm going to use is going to sound bad, but I don't really, care too much about what I'm specifically talk about in each and every slide, each and every single slide. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to improvise, uh, and I'm sure you must have guessed I'm using so many ums, so many ers. That's just because I'm improvising. So you can say that this is my style, and I think it's been going pretty well so far. So you should always do some practices. You should always uh, try different things in order to find your own unique style. So that was it. So we're going to continue with some questions, and these are going to be relatively easy questions. So let us start with the questions itself. So starting with question number one, which one of these statements is not true? A, practice makes perfect. B, interaction is the key. C, eye contact is unnecessary. D, knowledge about the audience is paramount. Or E, confidence is a must. Well, obviously the answer is eye contact is unnecessary. Well, eye contact is something that you should have whenever you're doing a presentation. You should always look at your audience, and if you're in a digital place, you should always look at your camera lens. So in order to give the feeling of I'm looking directly at you. So C is the answer here. It's not true. So the second question is that what features should a good presenter not have? So what should we not look for in a good presenter or presentator? Well, A is being confident, B is being knowledgeable. So there is a being knowledgeable. I misspelled there. So sorry about that. So being knowledgeable, being shy, being interactive, being funny. Well, the answer here is obviously, being shy is a feature a good presenter should not have. So, you should always be confident. You should always be, you should try to be not shy. But if it's your first time, of course you're going to be shy, yes. But, you know, again, practice is the key word here. So you should always make some practices in order to, get over your shyness. So again, C is the correct answer here. So continuing with the third question, how does using your body during the presentation helps you? So A, it takes away the attention from you. B, it gives attention to you. C, it takes the audience away from the presentation. D, it bores the audience. Or E, none of the above. Well, obviously, the answer here is B. It gives attention to you because if you're walking around during the presentation, people are bound to look at you whenever you're walking, whenever you are near them. It's like instinctual. They would just look at you whenever you are walking near them. So they will always give their attention to you when you're using your body. So let's continue with the fourth question. Why is practice important? A, it magically makes us better at presenting, might be. Or B, it reinforces our skills. C, it helps us develop bad presenting habits, example being shy. D, it helps us destroy our confidence. Or E, none of the above. Well, obviously, the answer here is B. It reinforces our skills. It reinforces what we have learned. It reinforces what we have learned from how should I say, our own practices, and it reinforces the things that we have learned from our practices and some other person's practices also. So practice is paramount, as I'm saying again. So the last question is, what cannot be the reason for the audience to be sleeping, as you can see in this picture here? A, the presenter is shy. B, the presenter is quiet. C, the presenter is uninteractive. Or D, the presenter is confident. Or E, the presenter does not know their audience. So there's a, misspelling or not just misspelling it, but completely wrong sentence here. The presenter does not know their audience, so it is not here. Sorry about that, by the way. So what should be the answer is that it's obviously D. The presenter is confident. Well, if you're a confident presenter, chances are that your audience will not be sleeping. They will pay attention to you. They will pay attention to your presentation. So being confident is not the reason for them to be sleeping like that. So this was my presentation. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope I can see you next week. See you later until then.